Hey, Mr. Usher again. Another recorded lesson, this time for our full credit class again. It's going to be for Tuesday, April 26th, 2022. That's what this one is for. Tuesday, April 26th, 2022. And again, for the full credit class, if you're in the 5th period or the 8th period, see you later. Anyway, yesterday we covered psychotic and dissociative disorders, and today I want to cover how they are generally treated, or unfortunately in some cases not treated. So yeah, that's basically what we have here. First, I wanted a quick reflection for you guys from the DIN on dissociative identity disorder. We talked about that in the last lesson and how controversial it is from a legal perspective, from a scientific perspective. It's kind of fraught with controversy. In particular, there's a concern over whether or not it actually exists. So the general consensus is that it does exist, but it is very rare. There's a belief amongst most mental health professionals that this splitting or fracturing of a person's personality can occur, and they can develop one or more alters or alternative personalities. But there is also a strong minority of mental health professionals that believe it is not real. That it is essentially confabulated either by the individual or maybe in conjunction with a therapist. Maybe they kind of push them into this theory based on a belief that the personality can fracture, even though it can't. And they kind of either intentionally or unintentionally urge the individual to believe they have multiple personalities. So just some thoughts on that. What do you think? Your thoughts, feelings, opinions, that kind of thing. First, for the treatment stuff, though, we focused on psychosis, particularly schizophrenia, right? So schizophrenia is probably the most well-known, most well-studied, and probably the most prevalent of the psychotic disorders that we study and treat. So I wanted to focus on that. And in particular, I wanted to look at a tiny bit of history into psychopharmacology, that is the medical science of developing medicines, basically, to treat mental illnesses, right? So the medicines that we use to treat psychotic conditions are generally called antipsychotics, right? They're medicines that fight psychosis, right? And there are kind of two generations or phases of this. There are the first generation or typical antipsychotics, and there are the second generation or atypical antipsychotics. Now, if you look at the atypical antipsychotics, we can actually pull up a little bit of information on this if people are curious. So we have antipsychotics here. Let's see. So here are some of the first generation or typical psychotics, right? Some of them you might have heard of before. Haloperidol, also known as Haldol. What else do we have in here? Let's see. This one, Compazine, is pretty well known. Trying to find some others that are more well-known, but not finding a lot of them in here, unfortunately. Anyway, the issue is with a lot of the side effects in the first generation ones. These were developed in the 50s and 60s to treat serious schizophrenia, and they largely worked on the psychotic symptoms, right? But they also had a lot of side effects, right? So if we look at some of the side effects with the atypical or the typical antipsychotics, they can be pretty serious in certain cases, right? So you could have things, like changes to your metabolism. It could affect you in such a way that causes diabetes. It could lead to seizures, maybe even stroke in serious cases. There were unusual muscle movements, right? Things that would kind of cause people to move in strange ways or tense up in strange ways. Let's see what else we have in here. Rarely people could develop OCD-like symptoms. We remember obsessive-compulsive disorder from a previous class. That could happen. What else do we have here? Those are the main ones, right? Other things can happen, changes to your mood, perhaps, but those are the main ones. And so we started to work on developing newer, better antipsychotics, right? What we call the second generation or atypical antipsychotics. So if we look at, let's see here. If we look at some of the atypical antipsychotics, on a second. Should have had this more organized, shouldn't I? But yeah, so you can get other side effects with some of these typical antipsychotics that were developed in the 80s primarily to treat schizophrenia. They do tend to work a bit better than most of the antipsychotics from earlier antipsychotics for most people, and they have less severe side effects. You might get things like headaches, dry mouth, maybe constipation or other kinds of digestive-related issues. But for the most part, things are less severe. Ooh, excuse me. So they're considered like a safer bet for most people. But yeah, an illustration of that actually comes with this video here, which we watched in class. I actually broke it into parts, right? Really 8 parts. There are 4 patients that you see here. The patients are part of a study, actually, that tried to show the efficacy of some of these newer antipsychotics. They wanted to prove to people that they really worked. So you had people that actually volunteered to be treated with these new antipsychotics, and they have the before and the after, so that's why there are 8 parts, right? There's the before and the after for all 4 people, so 4 times 2. Anyway, you can look at some of the earlier symptoms, the before medication symptoms, and it'll say on the screen before medication when you watch the video. And then they'll show you the person afterwards, right? The people's afterwards takes place anywhere from 6 months to 5 years after they started taking the medication. But yeah, in all of them, you see a noticeable improvement in symptoms going from, showing psychotic symptoms like delusions or hallucinations to not doing that, going from having jumbled speech to having clear speech, going from being catatonic and lifeless to being, vibrant and talking and expressing their desires, going from, just basically going from the worst of schizophrenia to a relatively manageable life. So positive thing, right? That's what I have this guy here for you to record your thoughts and feelings. That's what we did in the lesson, right? So that's typically how we would address psychosis, especially schizophrenia. Drugs in this case are actually what we call a first-line treatment for the most part. That means we would try them first, oftentimes because with a lot of severe schizophrenia, the person is so disorganized that without an antipsychotic first, it's difficult to even have talk therapy with them. We might bring talk therapy, especially psychodynamic therapy in, cognitive behavioral therapy in to help them reorganize some of their thoughts, but only after they've been stabilized at least somewhat by an antipsychotic. So that's the psychotic conditions. As for the dissociative conditions, things unfortunately are a little bleaker. Basically, what we have with these dissociative conditions is, not a lot of clear answers and not a lot of hope, I'm sad to say. So there are some things that we try, maybe for a dissociative amnesia, we might try to use hypnosis or sodium pentobarbital, which is sometimes known as truth serum, to kind of get the person to be more compliant and to, basically unlock some of the locked up memories in there. But that can lead to bad things too, because they might give kind of fantastic or inaccurate memories. They might confabulate things by mixing actual things that happened to them with things that they made up. We can try, for example, to reintegrate certain memories with people. We can try to train people with depersonalization or derealization episodes to kind of get back in touch with their body and back in touch with the scene around them, right? Maybe through something like mindfulness meditation. And for dissociative identity disorder, there's lots of things people try, but generally the goal is to reintegrate people, to take, so to speak, these shattered shards of a mirror and put them back together so that the person looks in the mirror, and every time they look in the mirror, they really see them, right? But these are mostly kind of guesswork and early attempts here. We don't have a lot of scientific evidence for any of these things treating dissociative identity disorder or any other dissociative disorder. The science really just isn't there yet. These diseases are very stigmatized. They can be very rare. And so getting a solid study for any of them is very, very difficult. So definitely something we need more work on because people are suffering with dissociative disorders. But yeah, that's kind of the long and short of it. It's hard to find a solid treatment for most of them. So anyway, that's the facts of it. In this case, there is a DIN, as I kind of already mentioned. There's not a ticket out the door. I basically just had you guys work on this writing assignment in lieu of that. So yeah, that is basically it for this. If you guys have questions, as always, please let me know. Otherwise, see you later.